Good afternoon, everyone. I see Mayor Avula is here. It is 3:30, and I know that Dr. Morris is also here with us, as well as Robert Page from HNTB. So we're going to get going. We have a hard out at 4 o'clock, so the mayor is going to speak, and then once he does that, we're going to open it up for questions. Please type your questions in the chat because we have a limited window here. The chat is going to be the most efficient way for us to get to as many questions as possible. So with that, Mr. Mayor, please take it away.
Thanks, Julian. Hey, good afternoon, everybody. We are gathering because the city is releasing the most recent iteration of the report from HNTB, who, as you all know, is the independent firm that we hired to investigate the conditions and the circumstances surrounding the January 6th power outage. This is not normal, like we normally wouldn't be releasing things at each iteration, at each draft stage, but given the sensitivity of this situation and I think just the level of scrutiny and desire for public trust and transparency, this is our good faith commitment to providing transparency and regular public updates as the investigation unfolds. And what I'll say is the report showed that the power outages we've talked about was caused by a winter storm, which was like the first step in this, that said the storm led to a power outage, and then a chain of events from there. What the report makes really clear are two things. One, that the water plant was operating in what we previously called winter mode, which means it relied on a single component to maintain power to the water treatment plant, as opposed to summer mode, where we have two sources and there's some redundancy there. So when that main power feed failed, there's something called an automatic transfer switch, the ATS, or also called a bus tie, that didn't work as it should have, and that prevented the switchover to the second available power source for the water treatment plant. And those two pieces, operating in winter mode and the failure of the automatic transfer switch, led to power loss at the plant for about 80 minutes. And that's what led to the flooding that occurred in the plant basement and the essential electrical equipment that was damaged, that ultimately led to that prolonged outage. So since our water service has been restored, our ongoing recovery efforts have really focused on reinforcing plant operations. Dr. Scott Morris, our Director of Public Utilities, has overseen that process and has been really successful in guiding the plant and the staff through two subsequent winter storms without service interruption. And I'll just quickly hit some of the changes that Dr. Morris has put into place. One, the plant now operates continuously in summer mode, so we always keep those two power feeds available. Second, we've put new emergency protocols in that have been established for inclement weather events. We've also looked at our staffing standards and modified and enhanced those, particularly for critical operations like electrical and engineering positions during potential emergency situations. We've also put new staff training practices and procedures in place. We've strengthened inspection standards for our equipment, our fuel, chemicals, and our systems, and we've invested approximately $5 million in plant repairs and upgrades since the event. We're super encouraged by the progress that has been made so far, but we also recognize there's more work to do to continue to build more resilience in the water plant operation. We're looking at HNTB's recommendations, and we're collaborating with certainly Dr. Morris, but also City Council to look at a wide range of options that may be needed to strengthen the plant operation in the future. And we look forward to the final HNTB report, which is expected later this spring. All right, with that, happy to take questions.
Okay, Mr. Mayor and Dr. Morris and Mr. Page, the first question that we have is from Melissa Hippolyte with Channel 6. That question is, in the HNTB report, it states there was no discussion of storm preparation from leadership at the plant and therefore lack of leadership and little direction on a course of action. HNTB found that staff in the plant didn't know what to do if a power outage occurred, and if it was unclear if the electrician who arrived early in the morning knew how to transfer power to the second feed. So the question is, how does the city hold plant leadership accountable going forward?
Dr. Morris, do you want to speak to kind of the training and expectations that you've set?
Yep, can definitely talk to that. And then if you have anything else to add, we can go ahead and do that. So the anticipation of moving forward is we're going to set the tools and resources needed to make sure that we have a sustainable plant in the future. And that goes through updating our SOPs, doing annual training exercises, going through and making sure that the staff on site know what to do and when to do it. And so holding each other accountable is, reaffirming that we're going to go through those SOPs, update them, and then hold those annual training exercises to make sure that they're familiar enough with those SOPs, but also have hands-on training to make sure that when the need is to do those emergency operations, the plant are adequately trained to accomplish those tasks.
No, I think it sounds like Director Morris and the team are putting in a lot of the recommendations that we have in the report for the ongoing training and to work through these exercises and get themselves ready for the next time an event such as this occurs.
Thank you, gentlemen. The next question in the timeline is from Sabrina, in the chat is from Sabrina Moreno of Axios. The question is, the timeline in the report released today says the head of the plant told former Director Bingham at 10 a.m. that the water might run out and she should consider a boil water advisory. Mayor Avula previously said that he didn't get the first full briefing on the water issues until around 1 p.m. Did former Director Bingham not tell the mayor or anyone else what she was told at 10 a.m. until then? And if that information had been available sooner, would residents in the surrounding counties have known sooner?
Yeah, I can't speak to whether she told anyone else. Again, the call that I got was from the chief administrative officer sometime between 11 and 12, which is why we pulled the meeting together at 1 o'clock. And that's when I got the full briefing. At the time of the briefing, it was anticipated we would still have water that would like, if it was maintaining the same rate of drop in the reservoir, that would likely happen around 6 p.m. So, if I had been notified an hour earlier that we were going to drop by 6 p.m., would that have accelerated things? Yeah, maybe by an hour, right? If we'd gotten the group together and could get those planning steps in place. I don't know how material that is, but I do. Yeah, if we had gotten some flow of information, we likely could have made a public announcement a little bit earlier. I will also say there's always the tension about the sort of innate human response to go and fill up the bathtubs and so there, even in our discussion, there was like, what's the right timing to really determine when people are going to experience this, because any announcement will lead to an acceleration of that timeline. So hard to know, but I think if everything had been moved forward an hour, we probably would have notified the public a little bit sooner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Next is Madison McNamee from Channel 12. She had a question similar to Sabrina's, but because that question was asked, has issued a new one. She said, can you talk about why summer mode was not used year-round before this? Is it going to be more expensive to operate this way?
Yeah, Mayor, I can.
Yeah,
you want to go ahead and take it? Yeah. So summer mode will be more expensive to operate because what's happening in this is there is a reduction in the cost per kilowatt hour associated with the Dominion account. We're currently reviewing that to determine what that actual value is, and I do not have it at my fingertips right now, but it will be a cost to operate in summer mode year-round. And taking context is also that the winter mode operation was strictly for the winter months, so that's only a portion of the year. So about 3 to 4 months typically they would operate in winter mode.
Thank you, Dr. Morris. The next question is from Ryan at Channel 8, who asks, and this may be another Dr. Morris question, can you explain the nature of the construction work regarding the reservoir's capacity at the time of the outage? What kind of work was being done?
Yeah, so that's a rehabilitation project that was already planned in the CIP, and that's to preserve the capacity in the reservoir. So unfortunately, it happened at the most critical time, and so a little bit of the capacity was constrained.
Thank you, Dr. Morris. Next question is from Dean at VPM, and this is sort of a two-parter. One, Mayor Avula said he felt the city properly notified counties when the preliminary findings were released. This draft report aligns more with reports by the counties that found communication delays, that the city didn't share the severity of the situation. Has this draft changed thoughts on how the city communicated? And then a second layer of that question is specifically for Mr. Page. Has the city declined to share anything with HNTB? So let's take Mr. Page first on access to information between HNTB and the city, and then the second part of the question, which is about communication processes from the city with its regional partners.
From our perspective, the city's been very open to working with us. They provided all the information that we've asked for, and to my knowledge, nothing has been redacted. I think they've been very transparent and fair in working with us and provided materials as soon as they were available to them. You know, this is an ongoing investigation, and so we're continually finding things and making requests to Dr. Morris and others, and they're responding to them in a timely manner.
Thank you. And then the first part of the question, Mr.
Yeah,
Mayor, is just
gotcha.
about city communication with regional
Sure.
partners.
Yeah. I mean, Dean, you might have to point me to sort of the specific concerns that it raised. I mean, I think that, the documentation that we saw from WRA whoever Henrico used, Avula, showed, clear evidence of city staff notifying Henrico County staff by about 9 a.m. I think that first email from Henrico staff to their own internal components was at 9:18 a.m. So, I mean, I think, you think about putting yourself in the position of, you're at the water treatment plant, a power outage, you're trying to problem solve, you see flooding, you're trying to really assess the situation. I still think 9 a.m. was an appropriate time, but obviously I think everybody would always say, hey, I'd love to hear something sooner, but realistically, with 7:30 a.m. about an hour and plus of problem solving, and then a 9 a.m. Notification, I mean, it seems reasonable to me.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The next question is from Michael Phillips with the Richmonder, and that question is, was the electrician who arrived at 6 a.m., as per today's report, able to turn on the generators? This might be a Dr. Morris question.
Yeah, I have to go back and look at the training records. I don't know if HNTB has looked at those to see if he was previously trained on that, but I can speak to the fact that all electricians on site have been trained after the event, and they've all signed off on receiving that training and the procedures associated with doing the transfer. But again, I'd have to go looking through the training records to make a determination if that individual had explicitly been trained on that item.
And off the top of my head, I don't recall whether that individual was trained or not, and I don't want to speculate at this time.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Morris and Mr. Page. The next question is from Samuel Parker with the Richmond Times-Dispatch. That question is, the timeline in the updated report moves back the VDH arrival time about 6 hours from 12:30 p.m. to 6:50 p.m. This aligns with internal emails between VDH officials that showed they were not aware of the plant failure until well after the city initially said. What was the cause of the discrepancy between the two reports? What documents were reviewed? Staffers were interviewed to correct the timeline? This is probably also a Dr. Morris and Mr. Page question.
Yeah, so most certainly. So we did preliminary interviews with staff, and that's what generated a cursory timeline to provide our consultant. And then we went through and we also provided that same draft on the preliminary report to our partners in VDH to make sure that there was no discrepancies. Unfortunately, that discrepancy wasn't noted. In reviewing the information provided by VDH, I think subsequently you guys corrected the report to reflect the information that we had with support and background documents. So we looked at call logs, response from VDH, if they had any call logs associated with any type of correspondence, and then we pulled the time frame associated with that from the VDH. Is that a fair assessment?
That is a correct assessment.
All right, the next question is, can you elaborate on what these staffing adjustments you're making are? How many people will staff the plant normally, and how many will staff it during inclement weather?
So we are going through and reviewing the staffing requirements. I think that's actually going to be a portion of the final report. We're trying to hopefully lock down that. Unfortunately, I don't have that right off my fingertips right now. But what we'd like to do is get all of our protocols established, all of our response systems up, all of our UPSs up, all of our valve actuators replaced, and the system fully in an automation mode, and then go through and do some testing sequence. And then once we can finalize that and then implement a couple of those other recommendations that were in the preliminary report and also the interim report. So those 1 hour UPSs. What we'd like to do moving forward is look at a staffing schedule that is both adequate for somebody having to call out, but also being prepared to do storm activities, but also provides a little bit of flexibility for responsiveness. So making sure that the UPSs we have in are sized appropriately. They can handle the valve closures. We have the summer mode in operation, so if in the event of a power failure, you go from primary to secondary, and then ultimately, we have a tertiary power supply. So that would be the backup generators as well. So taking all those things into considerations, we're going to work with HNTB and determine what would be the most appropriate staffing schedule that meets the needs, both from a resource constraint, but also to ensure inherent stability at the water treatment plant.
Thank you, Dr. Morris. Next question is from Dave Cantor at VPM. That question is, the draft report said the city didn't adequately convey the severity of the situation on the morning of January 6th to regional partners. I know we addressed this, but that's a follow-up question if anybody wants to weigh in on that.
I mean, I'm looking at the Henrico email, and it says the city of Richmond reported this morning that their water plant is down. They lost a Dominion power feed, which disrupted the plant and resulted in the flooding of filters. Our pumping staff coordinated with the city and reacted to reduce our draw from the city for now and increase our plant production. I just spoke to Doug Town with the city, and he stated that they're evaluating the situation and working to resume production as soon as possible, but couldn't provide a time frame. So I don't know, Dave, you tell me, like, what I'm looking at shows that there was a good faith attempt to say, hey, we're down, we're working on it, we're trying to figure out what's going on. And I don't know how else to comment outside of that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Next question is from Michael Phillips with the Richmonder. This question is addressed to Mr. Page, but I think it might be Dr. Morris first and then Mr. Page. Can you address when April Bingham was contacted to participate in the report and whether she has agreed to participate in future reports? Again, I think Dr. Morris can address the first part of that, and then Mr. Page can talk to their willingness to hear from Ms. Bingham.
Yes, so our staff reached out, and SDPU staff reached out to April Bingham on February 17th and February 18th and asked her would she be willing to share her contact information and participate in an interview process with our consultant. She declined at that moment, and then that information was passed on to our third-party consultant. And then if you want to speak to.
No, and then the city has also provided HNTB's contact information to former Director Bingham, and if she would like to call us, we're open to talking with her. So that's where we're at with it.
Yep, and that subsequent information email was sent to her on February 28th just to confirm that she had the points of contact with both the VDH consultant, SEH, and then also HNTB.
Thank you. We've got a follow-up from Melissa Hippolyte. She is following up on her initial question with more specific wording. She wants to know, I asked if the mayor or Mr. Morris plan to hold plant leadership accountable for what HNTB found as a, quote, lack of leadership. Now, how do you plan to hold folks accountable moving forward?
So I think that was a two-part question, but basically being, what did you do previously? And I'm not going to speak to personal matters for those individuals, but I can firmly tell you that going forward, the expectation is that you're going to get the proper training, and then you're going to do the procedures that are needed, and implement that as necessary to ensure the safety of the treatment plant, but also service availability. And we're holding people accountable, making sure that they do the right thing, and appropriate actions will be taken in the event that somebody doesn't.
Thank you. And we've got one remaining question here from Sabrina Moreno from Axios. And the mayor addressed this, but here's a follow-up. Henrico's report also says Henrico wasn't notified until around 2 p.m. that morning, or excuse me, 2 p.m. that there were major ongoing issues. HNTB's report says Richmond didn't contact surrounding counties fast enough. If they had, it could have limited how widespread the water issues were.
Yeah, I mean, I'll come back to the email, which like clearly shows that Henrico at least was in the loop. I think, yeah, maybe one of our learnings from this, and this is where we, in the ongoing conversation with HNTB, and Mr. Page would love to hear from you as well. But um, I, yeah, I mean, I think if there are recommendations for how communication could have occurred, sit reps that were going out on an hourly basis, like maybe that's one way that surrounding counties could have been informed more regularly. But again, I'll also point to the email, the rest of the, later on down in that email thread, our staff, right now, they have no production. They're relying on their storage of finished water. Our staff is working on increased water flow. Staff will keep coordinating with the water plant staff of the city for ongoing situational awareness. So, there's some subjectivity to that statement, and I will maintain that yes, like every communication can always be better. What does that actually mean for our protocols and processes? I think that's what we've got to work out for SOPs and an emergency moving forward.
No, I'd agree with the mayor. I mean, there's always ways to improve communication, and so we're looking to identify ways for the city to improve that if a situation like this would occur again, and just make recommendations along those lines so that everybody can be more aware and be better prepared for an event like this if something were to happen in the future.
Yeah, and I can speak to the ongoing responsiveness in the regions to make sure that communication stays open and steady. So in these last storm events, I've been actively communicating with our regional partners, making sure that they're aware of the current status of the facility, and any kind of inclement change associated with increasing demands, changing pump status. I've been actively communicating with them on a routine basis. So. I like to think that we've improved in that communication based off the findings of the report, and making sure that we make headways with our regional partners going forward to ensure that we spread information as readily as possible, but also when we know that there's a certainty associated with that information.
All right, we have two more questions in the chat, and then we're going to wrap after that in the name of time. Next one is from Michael Phillips, again from the Richmonder. The mayor spoke to the desire to release this report in the name of transparency. Is there the anticipation of further draft reports before the final report? Perhaps this is a Mr. Page question.
This is an ongoing development, and we don't plan to have any other drafts at this point, just the final report. But if there were something that were to come up between now and then, there could be, but I think we would work with the city to provide that transparency and release that and update the timeline. But as of now, there are no more anticipated drafts in our plan.
And just to add on to that, this is a joint effort between us and City Council. And so, I think if City Council and the auditor's involvement in this demanded it, like I think we'd be open to it. But, at this point, as Mr. Page said, we're moving towards the final report, hopefully a month and a half from now, right?
Correct.
Okay, and then our last question is from Ryan with Channel 8. The report found that the basement was prone to flooding. Now, I of course understand that the plant flooded during the outage due to other factors, but I was wondering if specific actions have been taken or will be taken to prevent more, quote, everyday flooding of the basement.
Yeah, I think if you review the interim report, it'll show a couple of recommendations associated with that everyday flooding type of incidents that's going through and sealing some additional cracks that may have formed, making sure that any kind of residual moisture is removed, making sure you follow the proper SOPs with maintenance to produce you in a more reliable or stable condition. But I think that speaks to what the report kind of indicates. But then again, as we move forward and new projects come on to the plant to be evaluated and designed, we'll be looking at any additional process improvements to reduce that effort going forward.
Okay, everybody. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Dr. Morris, Mr. Page. Appreciate you. Everybody have a good afternoon. To all the media, thank you for joining.